What's up? We got The Flash, Season 3, Episode 8, Invasion, Part 1. So this episode starts off with Wally basically speeding around, and we basically go through the same thing with Jesse. The Flash drivers didn't learn their lesson. They're like, hey, and Iris is like, hey, we gotta convince Wally to not use his power under any circumstances. Iris, we're gonna go through this with Jesse, and that didn't work. It's like you weren't there for that episode, so you just decided to repeat this. So yeah, I don't understand why they're redoing this again. We already went through this with episode 3 with Jesse. Why are they doing this story again where this time it's Iris against Wally using his powers to save lives? Because he's like, hey, no talking to him, no training him, and no making him a suit. Basically what we went through with Jesse, but now with Wally, because the Flash drivers didn't learn their lesson the first time. So the team are just hanging out when a big meteor crashes down. But it's not a big meteor at all. It's just a spaceship. And what's carrying inside that spaceship? Aliens. Because we went from immortal gods to aliens in these crossovers. These crossovers can't get any better. So then Lila shows up. Because shows up and she's like, hey, Barry, what's up? And he's like, do you know about the thing that crash landed? And she's like, we're calling them the Dominators. And he's like, well, that's not a race that wants to be peacefully. And she's like, yeah, they first attacked in 1951 Redmond, Oregon, and they basically started taking people and basically putting them like experimenting on them, and all of us so Barry's like, wait, since this is a crossover, we obviously have to get, and flashes to Star City where we see Oliver taking on Vigilante, where Felicity's in her loft for some reason instead of the Arrow Cave, because why? She's just in her loft. When Barry speeds them all in, Diggle does the vomiting joke that he's been doing, which is kind of funny, and Diggle's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, Barry, my life was kind of almost normal before I met you. He's like, sorry. And I like how this is a reference to kind of when Diggle said, first Damien Dar, then metahumans, what's next? Aliens? And guess what comes next? Aliens. So, yeah. So he's like, aliens, and he's like, aliens? And he's like, you guys are really gonna go fight aliens? And then Thea shows up, and Thea's like, I came over to give you your Mariel stuff, but it can wait. Count me in. And he's like, I thought you were quit. And she's like, I thought you were tired. And she's like, aliens, Ollie, aliens. Who doesn't get to fight aliens every day? Basically, Independence Day. So he's like, yeah, we have to call. Yeah. So yeah, let's call Stein, Sarah, and the others, and they can help us too. And he's like, we're calling themselves the Legend, and Felicity's like, egotistical but pretty catchy. How's that egotistical? I guess calling yourself a legend is pretty egotistical. So yeah. So we see Star Labs Hall, which would eventually become the Hall of Justice, and in one of the later crossovers, as I remember. So Barry's like, hey, he's like, Siska's like, hey, Barry, don't let what's going I'm not gonna let what's going on with us derail the mission. So they go to Earth 38 and get Kara, and that's what the ending of the last episode was. But I didn't want to spoil it. It will be the picture, but I didn't want to for last review. But I didn't want to spoil it. So they're like, hey, and he's like, he's like, this is my friend Cisco. And he's like, friends more loosely. We work together. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, you know how last time we remember World's Finest, how we teamed up, and you told me that if I ever need you, you would help. And she's like, what are we up against? So yeah, so we have Team Legend, Team Arrow, and Team Supergirl. And he's like, and yeah, so he's like, this is, and Oliver's like, hey Barry, I thought you were getting alien. And he's like, this is Kara Danvers as she's not on her Earth, Supergirl. And Jack's like, what makes her so super? So then she just laserizes an S, and he's like, wow, that's cool. And yeah, so she gets acquainted with all the teams, and yeah, so Oliver's like, hey, let's run a test on Supergirl. And I love when my TV child Sarah Lance is like, should we all just not think that we can hear what he's saying? My TV child is hilarious. My TV child Sarah Lance is the best. So yeah, so yeah, so they're basically like, where's so now that Ray's got his M suit rebuilt, even though we never got him seeing him rebuilt somehow, he's like, hey, where's Stein? And he's like, where's Stern? He's like, Barry, we should have told you this, but Stark died. And he's like, he died a hero. And he's like, a legend. And he's like, yeah. So then Martin shows Barry, and he's like, shows Barry like the time, like the video message of him for 4 years now saying how they can't trust him. And he's like, he basically mentions how he created flashpoints, lived with his mom and dad for a few months, and learned things were different. Like Cisco's brother's dead. John has a son to have a daughter, and Oliver's like, wait a minute, John had a daughter? And he's like, yeah. Yeah, I'm still trying to come to terms with this whole Flashpoint thing, but the writers love using it. That's annoying. So the writers love using this whole Flashpoint thing. So yeah, so they decided to go. So they decided to go, and so Martin just keeps having flashbacks of that girl. So he's like, hey Caitlin, will you drive him to his home? So they drive him to his home, and he sees that girl who calls him dad. Meaning that's Stein's daughter, who I'm guessing he created when he told his past self to spend more time with his wife, causing him and his wife to conceive a child, which would be Lily Stein. Interesting, Stein. You basically messed up the timeline yourself. So, yeah. So he's like, hey, Cisco discovers, and he's like, hey Barry, what? And basically, you should tell him. He's like, tell us what? And he's like, he basically tells him about how he went back in time and saved he's like, why shouldn't we trust him? And he's like, we went back in time, and Cisco's brother's dead. Everyone's lives changed, even you did. And he's like, me? What changed about me? And he's like, you had a daughter. And he's like, baby John was baby Sarah. And he's like, wait a minute, Barry, you just totally erased a daughter from his life? And he's like, yeah. He's like, Barry, you can't just go. And Sarah basically yells at Barry, saying about, my TV child yells at Barry, saying about how he can't change things, about, you know how she always wanted to go save the world, but she doesn't, she doesn't. So yeah, so he's like, hey, go on with that. And Oliver's like, this is crazy. And he's like, this is crazy. The first president, Traveler, was killed by the Dominator. So they have a new president show up who we don't meet until the third part. But yeah, so he's like, yeah. So basically Barry also changed it so Iris never wrote the timeline where he disappears. It was instead wrote by Julie Greer. So something bad must happen to Iris in the future if she was basically written out of the byline instead someone else wrote it. So that means Iris, yeah. What happens to Iris? What happens to Iris? So yeah, Oliver's basically like, hey, he would have done what Barry would have done if it meant seeing his family too. So then they get attacked by, so Kara, Sarah, Sarah, Mick, Jax, Speedy, all get mind controlled by the Dominators to this device, and they attack him, and Barry's like, hey Supergirl, let's see who's faster. So they do, but he's able to destroy the device, releasing everybody from their mind control. But then, as soon as they're done, everyone's zapped. Everyone's like teleported away. Yeah, but there's also a scene where Iris is like, hey Wally, hey Wally, you can't train. And he's like, everyone has spent like a year and you're like a newbie. And he's like, yeah, but I'm like, excuse me, Iris, how can you make that decision? You made Wally's sister, but Wally has to choose whether he can. Wally has speed, so you can't choose. That you can't just say, oh, he can't. He can't. People can just talk him out of being in the fight because Wally is his own person. And he's like, yeah, but do you know who does believe him? HR. And HR's like, yeah, if you want me to train you, yeah, I'll train you. So I did like this crossover, the first part, but the whole reusing of the Iris of the Jesse Harry storyline, but instead it's Wally and Iris and Wally. That's kind of brings it down because we already had this person has speed, but their father or sibling doesn't want them to do it. We already had this, Arrowverse writers. Why'd you have to make us go through this again? But instead of Harry and Jesse, it's Wally and Iris. That doesn't make that any better. But anyway, I'll see you next time for more of The Flash.